recording this. So we do record it so other people can obviously watch it later on. And we've seen a lot of people do that, whether they're on now or they're watching it later, they can access it on YouTube. So that's something we're seeing a lot of people do, is just watch it after the fact. So I just want to let you know, though, that it is being recorded and it will be used in the future for that purpose.
Sure. Good.
Okay. Well, I think what I'll do to just kind of kick things off and get started is just provide a brief introduction for you, Dr. Ewing, and then I'll just let you kind of jump right into your presentation. So if you don't know Dr. Ewing, she has been involved in fundraising in a variety of different fashions for a lot of years. And her husband are very engaged, not only on fundraising on the nonprofit side, but they've also had a lot of experience on the political side as well in their past experiences. So when I was looking at someone to do a presentation to talk a little bit about fundraising, she had a really good experience on both ends of the spectrum, on both the nonprofit side of things, but then also on the political side of things. So we were really happy for her to be willing to give a presentation on some good best practices of fundraising for political candidates. So with that, Viv, I'll let you take it away and get started on your presentation about fundraising.
Thank you, Drew. I appreciate that. I'm going to share my screen. So if you could give me sharing rights, I'll pull up my PowerPoint.
You should be good.
First of all, good morning, everyone. I'm Viv Ewing, and I'll be talking to you today about fundraising for campaigns. As Drew mentioned, I've done a lot of work with different campaigns, as well as my own campaign, and also done a lot of nonprofit fundraising as well, and friend raising, and helped countless organizations through the years raise millions of dollars. So I'm really happy to talk to you this morning. And I wanted to commend the Council Bluffs Chamber for putting on this session, because it's really important for candidates to receive this kind of information up front, as opposed to learning as you go, which is what a lot of people do. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'll be talking today about some best practices around fundraising, but also some tools that can help as you're managing those funds that you've raised. And so let me just see who else on the call today. I see Barry. Barry, tell me a little bit about your background. Are you running for office? Are you in office? Are you planning to run in the future?
I'm currently not running for current office. I'm planning to run for an office next year.
Okay.
At least that's my plan right now.
Okay.
My background is I'm a former insurance executive. I'm semi-retired. I'm still a farmer, and I've done a number of political fundraising, nonprofit fundraising ventures, just like you have as a volunteer. I ran RAGBRAI for the city of Council Bluffs twice. I was a co-fundraiser for the athletic complex here in Council Bluffs. I was the chief fundraiser for the new Dream Playground. And over the last 30, 40 years, I've done a lot of political action work. I was also a DOT commissioner for 12 years for the state of Iowa.
Wow, what an impressive background. I'm so glad to meet you today. Mm-hmm. The first thing I wanted to do is just talk about campaign finance from a definition standpoint. And when we're looking at campaign financing, we're really talking about all the funds that are raised that will be used to promote either the candidate or a party or various politically related initiatives. One of the things I wanted to talk about is what are those steps that really need to be in place as we look at best practices for fundraising. And there's a lot of things that can happen, but there's also some core essentials that should be in place if you're raising money for a campaign. One of the first things I do when I talk to people and do campaign advising, I certainly let them know before they ever start raising money, they need to do some other homework first. The first is being a credible candidate, making sure that you're a good, solid candidate running for that particular position. Many times we see individuals running who really are not credible candidates. And so you want to make sure you are credible. And you, Barry, sir, definitely credible. I'm going to vote for you. Anyway, so making sure.
Dr. Ewing, maybe you don't know me that well. So I'd be careful your judgment early.
One of the other really important pieces before you start is understanding the rules, the regulations, and the deadlines for filing and reporting, because that's something that we all have to follow, is the particular rules around when money has to be reported at the end of the month and quarterly reports and so forth. But knowing those dates, having those dates already planned out as a part of your financial plan. One of the other things I think is important before a person starts is really to determine who that finance director should be. And the finance director should be someone who is responsible, someone who understands numbers, not your sister's cousin's best friend's aunt, because they're nice. You need someone who knows what they're doing so that you don't miss any key filings, so that the right forms are filed, and someone who has attention to detail. So I encourage people to always find a good, solid finance director. And then the other key component before starting really is identifying early supporters who are willing to support you financially before you even announce. And that way, when you do start, you have a solid base to move forward from. So those are some key elements before an individual launches to officially say, hey, I'm going to run for office. I've done my filings, but having these components already underway. There's some core strategy here. Part of that is, number one, having a funding strategy. What's the plan? Creating that plan for raising those dollars. And we're going to talk about some components of what should be in that strategy in just a moment. But that strategy needs to have a thought out process on how you're even going to reach various donors. How do I get my message across so that I can say I'm a credible candidate, but then entice them to give to my campaign? So they're going to give to you because they like your platform. They might give to you because they like the principles that you stand for. They might even just vote for you or give to you because you are of the same political party. So you want to make sure that you're looking at your strategy broadly so that you can reach and meet as many people as possible. So a part of that strategy is going to involve an actual tactical plan. Are you going to do events? Are you going to do mailers? Are you going to do postcards? Are you doing things through digital media? All of that will be a part of that fundraising plan. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a couple of minutes. Another key component to that strategy, though, and this is where a lot of candidates get some heartburn, and it's really dialing for dollars, where you're getting on the phone, calling those donors and saying, hey, please support my campaign with a contribution. Any questions so far? What I wanted to do here is talk about a few staff members to add to your team as you're looking at that fundraising strategy. And I've listed 3 here. And these are 3 critical positions. I talked about the finance director already, but you also need someone to help analyze your data. Someone can help you that will take the donor database that you have and can slice it and dice it so that you'll know who you're going to approach and what you're going to be asking those various segmented voters and donors. Another key person to have on your team is really a treasurer or an accountant, someone who's going to actually manage your monies. And the other question around this is, will you be paying these people? Yes or no? And if yes, how do you pay for that? Well, 1, you're going to have to raise money. And 2, you'll have to make sure that the money you do raise goes as far as it can. So you're going to have to be strategic about who is a paid staff member with those funds that you've raised, because as you know, with campaigns, it's very expensive and it costs money to pay staff. It costs money to have all of those components in place. to have a successful fundraising initiative for your campaign. So I've got the first three listed here. And as you look at your own planning for the future, you can add other titles to this page, and I'll give this to Drew afterwards. But I wanted to at least begin some thinking around, who do I pay? Who do I have on my team to help me on this fundraising side? Another part of this whole planning piece to raising those funds involves looking at what are the key meetings you need to be a part of so that you have visibility. Because when people see you and get to know you, then it makes it easier for them to give to you as a candidate. So that's a part of your strategy in terms of fundraising, is being in the public and having those dates built into your fundraising plan, because the more you're out in the public, the more opportunity you have for people to give directly to you and your campaign. So if you're at a event that you're hosting, as you'll see noticed here, you can have your fundraising table where people sign in, you have a basket there or a container of some type where people can make a contribution right there. But I also encourage candidates to look at using technology for the fundraising as well. You can use text messaging technology so that people can give to your campaign, and it's something that's slick, it's easy, and it's inexpensive to do. And the reason it's important is because you want to make it easy for people to give to you. More and more people are getting away from writing checks. Some people still do, which is great. However, there's a whole lot that don't. You want to make sure you're making it easy for anyone to give to your campaign, whether it's a handwritten check or giving through their cell phone or their digital device. Another key component, let me just back up for just a moment, as we're looking at the funding timeline, is having your financial goals written out. So first quarter, I want to raise $20,000. And if I'm going to raise $20,000 in the first quarter, that means each month I need to have a certain deadline and a goal that I'm meeting at the same time. And then you break it down into a weekly goal from there, because that's a part of that funding timeline. Your weekly goal, monthly goal, and your quarterly goal, and your overarching goal as well. Another component of that fundraising timeline is planning out your phone banking time, because you want to have other individuals dialing for dollars as well, calling on your behalf and asking individuals to contribute to the campaign. You can have family, friends, and other individuals getting together during very specific times with a script, describing you as the candidate, talking about the principles that you have and that you believe in, and then asking for that financial contribution. And if you've done your homework using that data analysis person that I talked about a couple of slides ago, when you get ready to call, you'll know a little bit of information about that person already, because that data analysis person will be able to run some reports that can show you their giving history with regard to campaign giving. And that's important information when you're doing your phone banking. So you know that during the last cycle, this person gave to these types of candidates, and this is the amount they gave, because that gives you an understanding of their capacity to give for your campaign. So that research I talked about through that data analysis person is critically important if you're going to have a strong fundraising campaign. What I'd like to talk a little bit about next is just some things that will help from a best practice standpoint in terms of actionable steps and pieces of work you want to have in place as a part of that fundraising strategy. One is your marketing. That marketing is critically important because it gets your message out in front of donors and in front of your constituents. When you have your messaging out in front of people, you always want to have an opportunity for them to contact your website where they can easily click a button In order to give with your marketing, you want to make sure that within your website, they have as few clicks as possible in order to give. So you want your donate button to be right up front. You also want it to be throughout your website. You don't want people to have to hunt to find the donate button on your website page as you're trying to raise funds for your campaign. Another point I mentioned earlier, and I want to talk a little bit more about this, and that's the SMS. In other words, sending text messages to individual cell phones. You can get reports through various parties that you might be a part of that will show you the cell phone number for various constituents within your district. Once you have that list, you can then sign up for an SMS service where you can enter those numbers and actually send out hundreds, if not thousands, of messages at one time. And what you're doing with that is having a link after you talk about who you are, why you are a strong candidate, what your platform is. Please contribute to my campaign. And so that will be at the bottom. And then you have a button that they click that will take them directly to the site where they can donate. But that SMS technology is easy to use. As I said, it doesn't cost a whole lot. If you need to hire someone that knows how to do that, I would suggest that you do that as well, but you want to use some type of technology to reach as many people as possible for your fundraising. Your major donors to your campaign, those are the ones you sit down and talk to and say, listen, I'd like you to support my campaign. And they'll give you a dollar amount, which is great, but you can't reach everyone that way. That's where that technology comes in. You can also use e-blast or email to reach as many people as possible, where you send out using some type of email service where you can send out a structured email on very specific days asking for a donation. And the easier you make it for people, that will entice them to want to give because it's easy to give. You're a great candidate, they want to support you. So that email communication makes a difference in terms of raising funds for the campaign. And of course, there's mailers, there's postcards, there's letters, there's all types of mailers you can have. The postcards are things that we see when it's getting close to election day and we get 25 of them in our mailbox. However, you can also use those as a way to say, please donate to this campaign, especially early on when you're trying to get enough money to announce that you are a solid candidate. You want to get as much money as you can. One of the things I wanted to talk about with those mailers is you can invite people through a mailer to an event, a fundraising event. And it could be a house party where someone hosts a group of people at their home. They introduce you as the candidate and you give people an opportunity to give. Those can be very effective. You can use a mailer to invite people to a birthday party fundraising event for yourself so that people come to, maybe it's a restaurant and they have a room in the back that they let you use at no charge, and you have a small fundraising event there to raise funds. But those mailers can be used to invite people to those events so that they can give to your campaign. And again, all of that money adds up when you're trying to run a campaign because you have to have a continual flow of money coming in throughout the campaign. Even if donors give up front and you have donors who make a contribution because they believe in you and you haven't even announced yet, that's terrific. However, you want to have a steady stream of income coming in throughout that campaign. And those mailers, the text messaging, all of that can help. Another piece of this is what I call a contact management system, having a way that you're tracking who you're talking to electronically. It could be a plain Excel spreadsheet, which is what some candidates use. Others use electronic systems, and we'll talk about that more in just a moment. But there's different systems you can use to track your donors and your contacts with those donors. There's hundreds of different ways to do it, but the key is deciding what system works best for you. Are you able to afford a system online, Or are you more comfortable using something like an Excel spreadsheet to track donations and to track donors? But the key is knowing which system you're going to use and then following it consistently, making sure it's updated daily with donations that have come in. You always want to keep that information up to date so you know every single day where you are on your financial goals. Another key piece of that is identifying who those donors will be. One is identifying those major donors. Who are they? Making sure you have time to meet with them, talk to them about you as a candidate, asking for their support. But beyond those major donors, who are the other donors out there? One way to find out who that is to ask your political party for their donor database. They may charge you for that, but that is a critical piece of information that you want for any campaign when you're looking at raising funds, because that donor database or voter database basically will tell you who has voted in the last cycle or the last 2 cycles, so that you can begin to target those individuals for donations and for support. So related to that is the voter database analysis that I mentioned a couple of different times, and I can't stress that enough, because there is so much value you can get when you're raising funds for your campaign by analyzing the data that you have in that voter database. There are individuals that know how to do this already. There's others that might learn how to do it. I would encourage you to use someone who already knows how to use the voter database, because it's easier for you to get up and running when someone already knows the systems. And if you get the right person on your team, they will help you analyze that database with regard to age, gender, giving levels, how much they've given to the primary election, how much did they give in the general election, and things like that. But it's very, very critical data.
Viv, along those lines too, do you recommend, like I've worked on some campaigns, for example, where you have the Likert scale where it's 1 to 5 and you rank those people, and is that something you incorporate in that as well?
Oh, absolutely. 1 to 5 to rank these individuals in terms of where they are and how they can be helpful for your campaign. You absolutely want to do that, because you're going to have your top tier people that you want to talk to first or reach out to first. And then maybe there's a second tier, but definitely ranking those individuals is very, very important.
Drew, this is Barry. Could you explain the acronym you just used? I'm not familiar with that.
Oh, the Likert scale. So it's a 1 to 5. So how I did it, for example, when I was helping over in Omaha on some city council and state senate campaigns, it was a 1 to 5, and a 1 was for sure yes or no, depending on how you want to do it. A 2 was a likely no or yes, depending on how you want to do it. 3 was, it's up in the air either way, it's uncertain. 4 was, either likely, somewhat likely, or somewhat unlikely. And then 5 was lock or a certain no vote, just depending on how you wanted to do it and your preference. But then that way you have a ranking order, a rank to that individual. And then that goes back to not only for fundraising, but door knocking and a lot of different things that you're doing towards the tail end to get out for voter outreach.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but that the voter database is critical for any campaign. And then, as Drew mentioned, making sure you categorize those individuals, and when you're having your phone banking, making sure that the folks on the phone are using the same scale when they are talking to the people on the phone, a 1, a 2, or a 3, so that everyone's doing it the same way. That way there's no confusion later when you're doing your follow-up. And then related to fundraising is keeping your overhead low. You can raise a whole lot of money, but if you don't keep your overhead low, that money will go out the door. So looking at ways to streamline office expense, streamline who you have on your staff. I know when I ran for office, I used a lot of students who were studying political science, and that was a huge help. But I did have people that were paid staff as well. So you have to evaluate what works for you, but keeping that overhead low. If you need to print some materials at home for a while, then so be it. But you want to keep the overhead low so you have as much money as possible to do your marketing and your mailers and your signage, because all of that will eat up your money very, very quickly.
And Viv, I did have a question too about the first piece with the, text messaging, email, mailers. I assume nowadays, obviously, with the different demographics that you look at, first, say if it was example for a larger event and something that you wanted to invite people to, you're utilizing all three of those to hit different demographics, correct?
Right. You use all three, and then you're going to tailor your messaging to that particular audience. For example, one of the things that I did when I ran for office was I took my database, broke it out by age, I broke it out by some of their political interests, and I tailored my message to those groups of people. So if it was women who were over the age of 35, then I tailored my message that way. If it was a different group of people, I would tailor my message to that particular population as well. And because you're using technology, you can easily change your messaging to fit the audience so that you are providing messaging that resonates with those potential supporters and donors. But it goes back to that analysis of that voter database. And if you have the right person on your team, you can get a lot of mileage out of that voter database in terms of analyzing who you have and looking at the messaging you want to have for those various audience segments. It could be men over the age of 50. It could be men who vote Republican, men who vote Democrat. But you want to be able to segment out your audience so you can tailor your message accordingly. And then just going back to our dialing for dollars piece, because in any campaign, this is a critical piece of work that has to happen. And I know from doing some campaign management that candidates usually don't like to get on the phone and stay on the phone calling people, but it's a necessary evil, so to speak. But there's individual calls that the candidate makes. You can set up group calls where lots of people come together and have a script on your behalf, and they're asking for dollars or they're asking for a vote for you as the candidate, and then robocalls. Most people don't like getting those robocalls. However, they can be very effective if you have a strong message and you get out early with those robocalls. Those can be very expensive to do, but they can be very impactful in a very contested race. But I just wanted to spend some time on that because I know it's a key component of raising funds for a campaign. And that's just getting on the phone, old school, calling people up one by one, talking to them about who you are. And I'd like for you to contribute to my campaign and getting comfortable asking for those donations. And some tools I wanted to talk about related to fundraising. One is making sure that if you're running for office, that you get a hold of your party leader for the database information and the resources that your party can provide for you. And that can be critically important. So that's one of the first things I strongly recommend is to obtain those resources. And if it costs $200 or $300, it's money well spent. There's a lot of different campaign software available. And there's a site called Capterra. And what it actually does is compare campaign management software for you. And it shows you the functionality and how it works. So you know how if you're looking for a hotel and you go to kayak.com and it gives you an analysis of 5 different hotels, well, that's what Capterra does for these software campaign systems that are out there. It lets you compare all of them on the same criteria and you can read it in about 5 to 10 minutes. It's really, really helpful. From a text messaging standpoint or the SMS, Chat Tango is a resource to do text messaging. There's lots of text messaging companies out there. I would encourage you as a candidate to talk to your party and find out what they're already using. And are you able to utilize that same system? And what is the cost? That's a good place to start. Another tool is obviously your campaign volunteers who can help you raise funds. Those volunteers can come in a variety of ways. One, they can be on your staff, but also those volunteers can be the ones calling people on the phone, asking them to be a host for a fundraising party that they hold in their home. So you can have specific volunteers calling individuals, asking them, will they share their home for 90 minutes on a Saturday afternoon or a Thursday evening so that you can talk about yourself as a candidate, but also asking for a contribution. Those can be very effective, and you can actually raise several $1,000s by having those types of events. But it takes volunteers to call people to be those hosts for you, or you can call them yourself, which will take a lot of time. I would encourage you to use volunteers. Give them a script, tell them who you want them to call, let them know the dates that you're available to be at a house party, and let them get those set up for you as a fundraising event. But that can be very, very huge. Those volunteers can also do a number of other things for your campaign as well. And also another tool, and we all know this, but it's your paid staff. They can be very helpful when it comes to helping you raise money for your campaign. I think that paid staff can do a lot. And usually on a campaign, they're going to do 2 or 3 or 4 things, not just the one thing you hired them for. But the paid staff can be very, very helpful to set up your birthday party fundraiser. They can set up all these other types of public events that you might do where people come and meet you as a candidate. Maybe you have a forum that you're hosting, and it's also a fundraising event at the same time where you're talking about the issues, and at the same time, you're asking for a contribution for your campaign. So when you're looking at that fundraising strategy, it has to be very, very wide and broad in terms of the approach that you take. You want to have a variety of ways that people give to your campaign, a variety of types of events, a variety of materials that you're sending out, asking for that contribution, whether it's text messaging or an email or a letter or a postcard. Because again, you want to make it easy for people to donate to your campaign. So one of the thought-provoking questions I have is this. Let's say you are a candidate for the school board, and this is for the November 2nd election. And you already have $20,000 raised, but you need to raise another $50,000 between now and the election in November. And so my question is, how do you raise the funds, and then how do you allocate those funds? Because raising it is a part of it, but how you allocate those funds is critically important. So you have to consider, how do you pay your staff? Are you paying for an office? Because you may or may not have an office. You might work out of your home. Are you having to pay for equipment? Do you have to pay for your local party database, marketing tools, campaign tools? And so raising it is a part of the puzzle, but also how you allocate those funds is equally important. They go hand in hand. And so that's a question that I always like to challenge people with when they're looking at running for office is, okay, how do we raise the funds? Number one, what are the strategies we're going to use? What are our dates for the fundraising? And then how are we going to spend those funds so that we're getting the most out of every dollar that's raised? because raising campaign dollars isn't always easy. It takes time. And when those dollars come in, you want to make sure it goes as far as it can. You also have your printing costs when you're looking at running for office. As you get closer to election day, you're going to have several printings that you have to do with postcards that go into the mail for early voting. And some of those postcards will be going out every single day for a while, and it costs money. So how do you make sure you have enough money to do that? So that strategy of raising those funds is important because, again, as I said earlier, those funds have to last you through that entire campaign, and you want to have money coming in continuously. The other thing to consider is, are there people out of state that can also give to your campaign? So it doesn't just have to be someone in Nebraska or Iowa. It could be other folks in other cities that give to your campaign as well. What questions can I answer for you so far?
So just to give you some perspective, when I've talked to folks who are currently on the school board, a lot of times they ran a very minute campaign. They did a lot of things, with marketing, family, friends, did a lot of things online, social media, things like that. So, when you look at, for example, the school board race, what would you, with your experience, say would be the biggest thing that you would, as you prioritize those things, what would you say, say you brought in $10,000, what would you be looking at as far as a rank order if you're running a pretty minute campaign?
One is going to be my mailers that I send out for early voting. Two is going to be my text messaging that's targeted to very specific donor populations or voter populations. And then three, I would also do a lot of social media, because social media, there's no charge for that. I would get some young folks who are adept with social media, which is actually what I did, and I help other people do the same thing, but get some folks who are very savvy with social media to help you do Facebook Live and other types of social media events so that you continually get your face out there, and also provide a link so that people can donate as they hear you talking in that social media. But that's how I would allocate the dollars, is my postcards, any type of text messaging I want to get out, and then social media, which is free. Because for a small campaign, you don't have a lot of money to pay for the bigger types of things. But you want your message out there in front of people, and you want your message, you want your name in front of them when they're voting. So that's why those postcards are going to be very, very helpful. Postcards that come out during early voting, it's critical that they see your name before early voting happens, and you want to time it where you actually plan it out on a calendar. We're going to drop them in the mail on this day. They will arrive by that day. It's all strategic in terms of timing when those things happen.
Barry, I've got a question. At any point on the curriculum for the academy, will we get a ballpark on what an estimate is to run a campaign, like a school board locally, or city council or county supervisor? I know for a congressional race, it's millions of dollars, but I don't even think it's the 20,000 for the school board here as an example. So will we be getting an estimate?
We don't have that set in the curriculum, but we do have panelists. Like we had Chris LaFurla, who's the head of the CB school board, last session on the 25th. Justin Schultz was also part of that. Melissa Head was part of that. Obviously Mayor Walsh is on here. But those are things that you can ask those candidates, to speak about. We can obviously speak with Chad Hannon, is going to be on the panel here after this, and then Gronstall, Segrist, and Mathis have more of a statewide perspective, obviously, as well. But yeah, those are questions you can ask them. And Viv obviously probably has a decent perspective too on what it would cost to run a race like that.
Yeah, another follow-up question. I wonder, can you look up on the Iowa Ethics Campaign site to see I know you can see how much money was raised by candidacy. Is there a column there for how much was spent?
I do not know the answer to that. Viv, do you happen to know?
You can look up how much people made on a campaign in terms of what they raised. As far as what they spent, you'll have to go back and get some of the filings that people turn in at the end of the campaign in terms of monies that were expended.
Right.
That's going to be a few weeks after a campaign. Actually, you can look that up online. It's not easy to get to, but you have to kind of dig through the site to get to it, but it's out there.
That would give somebody an estimate of how much money they have to raise for a particular campaign.
Yeah, I think for a school board, a local school board, I would say 10, 20,000. For bigger positions like Congress, you're looking at least a minimum of a couple of million. So it's going to vary by position, but to get a very specific number, what I would encourage you to do is to talk to the party chair. Each party, no matter what party you are a part of, will have a party chairman or a chairwoman. They can spit out numbers and say, hey, for a school board race, this is what it usually costs. For county board race, this is what it's going to cost. City council, because they already know that, because they live in that world every single day. If you want to get a more specific number, I think that the party chairs can be really helpful in providing some of that additional detail. What I always do for myself and candidates that I work with is I always encourage them to do their research so that they know what they're walking into. And I like to research, so I like digging through the website and finding all these nuggets of information. But you may not be a researcher or like it, but I think that if you're looking at a school board race, 10, 20,000 would be a safe number to look at. And that money will go very quickly, especially as you start doing those postcards that have to go out with early voting, because it makes such a huge difference. And that's why you have to continually have that stream of funding coming in. Because the cards cost money, the postage costs money. So you have to make sure you have funding coming in to cover all of those things.
Mayor, did you have something to add?
No, I just was going to say they do report that to the Iowa Campaign and Ethics, not only receipts, but expenditures. But one of the problems is that there's sometimes to business names that don't tell you what their specialty is. So it might be the ABC company or the Smith company. And so it's, unless you're familiar with them, you likely can't figure out what they're spending. The nonpareil, it's newspaper advertising, but doesn't always give you the answer, I guess, you're looking for.
And Viv, to your point too, in my conversations that I've had with Chris and others, like Chris being the head of the CB school board, I mean, he said the same thing you did as far as amount. Like I said, he ran a very minute campaign, but I think he threw out about 2025 was kind of the high level ceiling of what you would need to successfully run a campaign for CB schools.
The other thing you have to look at too is you have kind of an average of what people spend. It doesn't mean that you have to spend that much. It means that that's the average. So you could be a little higher or a little lower. So you always have to judge that number by what makes sense for your campaign to have that strong campaign.
And also name recognition and a lot of other things that go into it.
Right. But I do think the question on the chart here, I think it's helpful because it makes us think about how are we going to raise funds? How are we going to spend those funds? Because you don't want to have a campaign where you're trying to figure out how to pay for a mailing. You want to know you have the funds in there to do whatever mailing you have to do. And so I'd like to see if there's any other questions that you have in our time together. I know that individuals who are thinking about office currently think about things like, how do I raise money? How am I going to run the office, not run the office, but run the campaign? Most people get a campaign manager. Some campaign managers are free because you know the person. Other campaign managers, you have to pay for that expertise. But I would always encourage candidates to consider getting someone who's knowledgeable and skilled at being a campaign manager so that you can have the very best campaign that you can. If you're going to run for office, you want to run to win, not because it's a nice thing to do. So, because that's a whole lot of money that you're spending just because it's nice to do. You're in it to win it. So you have to have the right team in place to do that. And part of that team is that campaign manager, but it's that finance director too, because they're going to help you map out that financial plan for the campaign.
Viv, I've got a comment. First of all, I just want to compliment you on your curriculum here. Is very informative, and I think you covered a lot of, all the bases really well. I do know I've had some experience with the Iowa ethics campaign system, and that does require when you set up your candidacy through that system, you're required to name a treasurer. And you don't have to name a campaign manager or anyone else, but you are required to have the name and address and contact information for a treasurer.
Right, right.
And the other thing is, I don't think the local races are going to be near as expensive as maybe what we've been talking about. I know as a treasurer for a couple of campaigns in the past, we raised, $7,000 to $8,000 was what we spent. So
that's good. Because 7,000 or 8,000 is manageable.
yes.
Viv, I just wanted to go back to you mentioned about the party databases. Obviously, if it's a nonpartisan election, it's a little bit different story, but we all, people can still work with their parties and such. But can you really just, again, I can't overemphasize the importance of that data. And then not only when you get that data and you input the Likert scale kind of thing, like I talked about, and then not only does it benefit you, but then it also benefits the party going forward. So I just didn't know if you wanted to expand even further on that, because like I said, that's just a really valuable tool.
Yeah, that really is the heart of your campaign, is that voter database, because that is going to tell you, again, who voted in the last cycle, who voted in the last 2 cycles or the last 3 cycles. It's going to show you the voter turnout. It's going to show you, if you break down the numbers, it'll actually show you who's voting, not just male, female, but it can also help you see the issues that they believe in. And if you know the issues they believe in, you can tailor your messaging to those specific issues. That voter database is essential to a campaign. And then related to that, however, is having someone who can analyze that data. It's one thing to have it, and some people can run a report from it. You want more than just a report. You want an analysis of that data in terms of who these voters are, what are the issues they're concerned about, how do they typically vote? Do they vote in a presidential year? Do they vote in a non-presidential year? So you want to know that data, because that helps you to plan out your campaign and how you're going to reach those people. How are you going to not only just reach them, but also get them to donate to your campaign? They're going to donate based on the messaging that you have and who you are as a candidate. And so the more you know about those constituents out there, then that helps you tailor your message so that you can have a message that resonates with those voters, not only for a vote, but also for $1 or dollars. And you want to continually touch those individuals in that voter database. Typically, if you look at giving patterns, people need at least a minimum of 7 touches from you in order to feel comfortable giving to you. So that's something that you want to keep in mind as well, is how continually to touch those individuals. And that, again, that database is one of the first things I encourage people to get a hold of. And if you have to pay for it, which you will, it's worth it.
Did anyone else have any other questions or comments for Dr. Ewing before we have her jump off and move to the panel that's coming up next to talk about fundraising and voter outreach? Well, Dr. Ewing, thanks again. Like Barry said, that was really, really good information. And I look forward to being able to share that with additional folks, not only through the recording, but if you're real comfortable with sharing the PowerPoint, we'd be happy
I'll
to share
send
that
that
as well.
over to you. I'll send it over today.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate you taking the time. And like I said before, if you want to stay on for the panel, we have former Senator Gronstal, Senator Mathis, Representative Segrist, and then Chad Hannon, a local city council member for the panel. So you're welcome to do that as well if you have the time.
I would love to, except I have to get to a meeting over in Omaha. So
Understand.
I have a great session. It sounds wonderful. I wish I could be a part of it. And I appreciate the invitation today.
Well, thanks, Dr. Ewing. Drive safe over to Omaha.
Thank you. Have a great weekend,
Jeff.
everyone.
Bye. And then Senator Mathis and Mike and Chad, we're waiting on Brent. So we probably will just take a little bit of a break here. We have a couple minutes.
Well,
so
you know,
people-
that's kind of the story of my life. Waiting on Brent.
Yeah, I was wondering if you were going to jump in on that one. So yeah, we do have a few minutes. So that way, if people taking part, need a bio break or whatever, we can have a few minutes to do that. So we'll jump on here in just a few minutes and get started once Brent's joined us.
Okay.
Thanks. Perfect. Brent, I see. Are you able to hear us?
I can hear you.
Perfect. Yeah, we were just letting everyone have a little bit of a bio break before we got started with you guys. But now that we have everyone on, I think we can jump right into the segment now that it is right at 10:30. I did want to let all of you know, just as a courtesy, we are recording these sessions, as I mentioned in the email before, just as a way to share it with additional folks that may not be able to be on live today. We've seen a lot of good response in our data analytics as well of posting the previous one we did on June 25th to really see that there's additional folks watching those, which we're happy about as well on our YouTube channel. So just to kind of do a brief introduction before we kind of start the panel. And as I noted, I'll kind of just moderate the panel and kind of ask the questions and make sure that we're touching on things. But I do also want to allow, you'll see that we have Barry Cleveland and then Mayor Walsh also on with us today. So I do want them to feel free to jump in with any questions at any time as well. But before we kind of get into some of the comments and discussion, I really wanted to just give each of you an opportunity to introduce yourself, and I'll kind of just go down the list and have you start with that before we get into questions. And Mike, we'll start with you.
Okay, my name's Mike Gronstal. I used to be in the state legislature. I retired for reasons of health in 2016. My constituents were sick of me. Spent 34 years in the legislature, had a great time. I now, after 2 years, you can lobby. I now represent the Iowa State Building and Construction Trades at the Capitol, and also the Iowa Utility Association at the Capitol during the legislative session. So other than that, I'm Connie's gopher here at home in Council Bluffs, and work on lots of home improvement projects.
Well, thanks for being here with us, Mike. We look forward to having the conversation and learning from your knowledge. As you said, you spent a lot of time there and running the Senate for those decades. You learned a lot, I know, that you can share with some folks. So we look forward to the conversation. Brent, we'll go to you because I know you two had the pleasure of serving in your respective leaderships of your chambers for some time as well.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. It's always good to be on here with Senator Gronstal. As long as we have the mute button, we'll be good. And that probably goes for me too. Brent Seeger is currently serving in the Iowa House for District 16. Like Mike, I had retired from the legislature. I served 18 years and got out, and then decided to run again last November. So I'm in my first or 19th year, however you want to look at it. Things have changed quite a bit since my previous service, but we have run many campaigns, and like Mike said, we've been involved in campaigns statewide, so we do have a little bit of knowledge there on how to do some of these things. So looking forward to the opportunity, and I would say, first off, this candidate academy I think is great. It ought to be emulated across the state. We do need to get more people involved at all levels of government, and this is a good way to do that. So kudos for the whole process. I think it's an important process for us to go through.
Well, thanks, Brent. I appreciate that. And we've been very happy. I've talked up this panel quite a bit because of who we have on it and the fact that we have Senator Mathis actually joining us from across the state. Senator Mathis, I'll jump to you and let you do an introduction of yourself.
Yes, there is a body of people, that are east of Des Moines. So we're glad to be part of this. And with comedic entertainment, between Brent and Mike, this should be a very lively hour. I'm Senator Liz Mathis. I live in Hiawatha, which is in Lynn County, District 34. And my district includes Marion, Robbins, Hiawatha, Cedar Rapids, a small town of Bertram, 80 people there, and Ely, and a little part of Mount Vernon. So that's kind of what my district looks like. I was elected in a special election, which I think we can probably talk a little bit about that too today, what a special election looks like, rather than maybe being elected into a general election. And it was a 7-week campaign in 2011. And then I turned around and had to run again in 2012 and have been in the state Senate since then. And we really miss Mike Gronstal.
Thank you, Senator Mathis. And we're happy he's just still in the area. He's been a good resource for a lot of different things. So we're happy that he's on with us today too. And then Chad, that brings us to you. So happy to get a welcome from you as well. And you might be playing Peacemaker too.
Yeah. I'm just honored to be amongst some very important people here, obviously. I'm just a lowly city council member here in Council Bluffs. Ran for office, city council twice, once in 2013. We didn't have a class like this during that time. If we had, maybe I wouldn't have lost. Learned a lot about what not to do, and a little bit about what to do in the off chance I ever ran for office again. In 2014, I won a riveting write-in campaign as a soil and water conservation district commissioner, with 9 write-in votes. That started as a joke to one of my friends. It was a vote for 2, and there's only 1 name on the line. And I made the joke, how terrible is this job? Turns out it's not terrible. But with 9 votes, I got to learn a lot about what it was like to be an elected official in a small office that really helped me learn about how a meeting is run and what responsibilities are associated with it. Fast forward to 2019, I ran in a very crowded city council race against 3 incumbents who had impressive political experience, and took those lessons about what not to do and maybe a little bit of what to do and put them to work, and performed well in the election, came in second in the primary and ended up winning the general election, and capitalized on some of the opportunities that were out there, and used my strengths, or my perceived strengths anyways, to my advantage. And I have spent the last year and a half serving the people of Council Bluffs and learning a lot, and leaning on some seasoned veterans, a few of which are on this call, when I am struggling with something. But it's been an experience for sure.
Well, thanks, Chad, and we're happy you're here, and look forward to you providing the local perspective from your 2 races that you ran for. And then, just as I noted, we have Barry Cleveland, and then Mayor Walsh is also on. Barry was on the DOT Commission for a number of years, and he's active in politics locally here in Council Bluffs as well. So the first thing that I want to make sure that we're talking about is just, some of the keys to effective fundraising for more so the local and city or school board campaign, and what realistic expectations are. Obviously, Brent, Mike, when you're running a statewide campaign, it's a little larger scale, but when you start off and you're looking more at a smaller scale, like your school board or your city council, can you just kind of talk a little bit about, like I said, that effective fundraising and what realistic expectations are? And we'll go in the same order that we started with, and we'll start with Mike.
Okay. So obviously there are great differences between running for the legislature, where there's kind of an infrastructure of moneyed interests that regularly lobby the legislature and have PACs, and a lot of those entities don't participate at the local level. So probably a little more than that, at least than I remember, for the city council, but school board, kind of not so much. School board and those local offices. And so figuring out how, the challenge with fundraising, let me start with something that applies to every race. And I tell people, and maybe men will understand this a little better than women, and I knew that would get a nod out of Liz Mathis, kind of going, what the hell is he going to say? But what I say to candidates, as I coach candidates on running, and that they're like, kind of one of the first things they say is, hey, I don't want to ask, relatives and friends and neighbors to contribute to my campaign, to which I usually respond, well, if your relatives and your friends and your neighbors won't support you, why should anybody else? So but sometimes people's first reaction is, oh, I don't want to ask, those folks for money. They're friends. I don't want to spoil that. Well, you kind of got to get over that. And kind of the example I use is that it's kind of like when Brent and I were in high school, and if we went to a dance, and if we asked 10 girls to dance, and if 9 of them said yes, which, by the way, wasn't either of our odds.
Very unlikely.
If 9 of them said yes, when we drove home that night, we were thinking about the one that said no. And what did she think was the matter with you? And I think women can kind of understand that. Well, that's kind of fundraising. Every time you ask a girl to dance, if she says no, that's an ego threat, right? Well, every time you ask somebody to donate to your campaign, that's an ego threat. You're kind of going, well, why wouldn't they support me? Gee, I know them pretty well, and I've always been responsive to their concerns. Why wouldn't they? Every ask is an ego threat, and it makes it very hard for people to ask for money until you get over that. And say, hey, that's part of the job, like it or not. If you want to make policy at the city council level or in the state legislature, money is a part of the game. And you've got to get over the part of that where you consider it an ego threat whenever somebody says no. Nope, they said no for whatever reason. they may be great supporters of yours, but they're not inclined to contribute. And that's okay. And once you get over that, and by the way, if you never asked in high school, you never got to dance. Well, if you never ask when it comes to raising money for a campaign, you don't get to go to the dance and make the policy. So that's kind of the message I give. Now at the local level, in order to figure out how much to ask people for, that's kind of tough. In the legislature, we're used to asking people for $1,000 or $2,500, individuals, and for PACs in some cases significantly more than that. At the local level, I don't know what to ask for. And so the first thing I would do is go through some old campaign finance reports of other people that have run for office and kind of look at the numbers there. And if nobody other than your mother has given you more than $100, probably $100 is the top end of the ask. And I'd also say, out of literally tens of thousands of fundraising calls I made over 34 years, there was only one time that I kind of felt like I asked for too much. Okay, only one time. So people won't, so if you ask somebody for $500, you go, oh, I don't think they can give that. Well, they're not going to be insulted that you asked for too much. One time out of tens of thousands of calls, I think I kind of put somebody off by asking for too much. But it doesn't hurt to do a little research on candidates. And like I say, campaign finance reports. By the way, you have to be careful. It's not legal for you to use campaign public data to create your fundraising list of who you're going to call. And when you get above state legislative level, when you get to Congress, they literally put some fake names in the database. The FEC is aware of this. They put fake names in the database. And if you call that person and ask them for money, they presume you've stolen that from the publicly available information. So that doesn't apply at the local levels, but it's a good way to get a handle on how much to ask people, is to research those lists of previous contributors to various campaigns. And most of those are individual contributions at the local level, but certainly some institutional support there. So on school boards, you probably have some teacher unions that engage in those campaigns, but that's the kind of thing, by looking at other people's past reports, you can get some picture of the kinds of folks to ask for money. So I think I'll stop there and give Brand a chance to correct me.
There's nothing left to say after that. But that's why I kept hitting the mute button, but it didn't work on my end. Everything Mike said is absolutely correct. I mean, that's extremely good advice. I would emphasize a couple things. One, particularly at the local levels, it's a little more difficult, I guess, to figure it out, but family and friends letter. I mean, that's where you have to start out. You have to sit down and figure out who your family members are and your friends are and ask them. Some of them probably, particularly at some of the local races, some people that you may know have never given before. But they're not going to be upset that you asked because they're a family or a friend. And if they've got the money, they'll help you out. The thing to remember at the family and friends letter, which is where you've got to start, is that if they give you money, you got their vote. I mean, that's the key. It's kind of nice, particularly at the legislative level, you get all this out of state money or money from across state, but those people don't get to vote for you. The people you get in whatever area you're running and they give you money, you've got their vote. So that's why that's extremely critical. Start out with family and friends letter, particularly at school board, city council level. As you move legislatively, as Mike said, there's PACs to consider and other organizations to consider. Second thing is that he said that's extremely on point is you got to ask. For me, probably the worst part of being in politics is asking for money. It's never overly comfortable, but as Mike said, you get used to it after a while and understand some of the bigger donors and bigger donors at the legislative level could be people who give $5,000, $10,000. But at a city council level or at a school board level, could be somebody who gives you $100. I mean, because that's a bigger level at that range. But a lot of people that are at that level are used to giving money. I mean, they get hit up for everything in their community, every nonprofit, every fundraiser, whatever. So they're used to it. So you got to ask. And as Mike said, it's pretty hard to ask for too much, because when I've been asked for money before, when you ask for money, if it's too much, they're just going to say generally, no, but I can do this. You ask for 500, no, but I'll do 250. The bad part is when you think, this person's okay, and I ask for 500 and they go, okay. It's like, crap, I should ask for 750. So you don't want to be outrageous, but don't set your sights too low, because they'll tell you if they don't want to give you that much, or they'll tell you they're tapped out because other people have already hit them, but don't be afraid to ask. So I just emphasize those 2 points and let Liz and Chad have some other comments.
Thanks, Brent. And that brings us to you, Senator Mathis.
Sure. I think that, both Mike and Brent have brought up great points about fundraising. I'd say the practicality of it, and I've raised money for both a nonprofit, led a $6.1 million campaign for a project here in Cedar Rapids. It took us about 1.5 years to raise, and then have raised money for that same profit each year, about between $600,000 and $800,000. So I'm one of those rare birds that I don't mind picking up the phone and asking people for money, because I've done it. And that it's a skill that I think journalists have, and maybe salespeople have, that you're constantly on the phone and asking people either questions or you're asking for the sale, right? And it's kind of like that. It's the same skill set. So if you're a candidate and you're going to be running for office and you have to raise money, and let's say you do have a background in asking people to do things or to give things or to participate, it's that same skill set. I had a guy stop me one time when I was raising money for the nonprofit, and he said, Liz, how do you do it? How do you ask people for money? I said, I'm not asking them for money. I'm asking them to support a cause. It's not about me. It's not about a person. It could be about the nonprofit, but it's really about the goal in mind. What's the goal in mind? So I'm asking them to help me as kind of a vessel, really. I'm a person who's going to get the work done, get the point across, get the job done. And so if you support me getting into office, then we can do these things together. So it's things like with a donor, you may talk about, quality education, everybody wants it. Quality healthcare, everybody wants it. How we decide to pay for it may be different, but everybody wants basically the same things. And so you talk about those things that are commonalities in the phone call. And the number one thing is relationships. Sometimes it's hard to pick up the phone and call somebody you don't know. And if you have good relationships in the community, you can really utilize that to kind of catapult your fundraising. If you do not, there are different ways to break the ice, or ask someone to help you break the ice. Maybe ask them to give a call before you would call and say, what do you think about this candidate? Or what do you think about a cause that you're going to bring before the legislature? Do you align with Senator Mathis? Do you align with so-and-so? And so it gives you, as the candidate, some fodder, gives you some information that when you go to call that person, it isn't an icebreaker then. It is actually that you have some good information behind you as you make the call. It is hard work. When you put a database together, you have to keep updating it. You have to keep making sure updating it in terms of, mailing lists and amounts of money that they've given you. And I usually keep a running percentage of where my money is coming from. If it's from Marion, if it's from Robbins, or wherever in my district, and then from across the state. So I can kind of keep track of the caliber or the percentage of where that money's coming from, and understand that the people who are supporting me, I want those people from my district first. That's what I want first. So again, relationships, huge. And kind of what the dance story that Mike talked about, that percentage, I'm going to talk about it in a different way. The more calls you make, the more money you make. It's just that it's math, right? The higher percentage of calls you make, the more yeses you're going to get. You're going to get a lot of no's too, but you're going to get a lot of yeses. When you declare that you're going to run for office, I always think half my friends, there they go, but you sometimes realize those friends will support you in different ways. They may give you 50 or 100. They might not give you 250 or 500, but they'll support you. And then they kind of sit back and wait and see what happens, right? But again, it's relationships. For practicality, if you're serious about doing this, read the code. If you're going to become a lawmaker, read the code. So go to the Campaign and Ethics Disclosure Board, just Google it, and you'll see it 68A and 68B. And so you'll learn about fundraising, what the law is around it, and then you'll learn about ethics and lobbying as well, and what their laws are. And you need to know that too as a candidate, what you can accept and what you can't, and the conditions around that. You have to be very aware of that. I call Megan Tooker, has been the director there, and I call her probably once every other month and say, what about this? What about that? And they are the guidepost for you. They really will help you. They'll help you understand what the law means. And then you can keep between the ditches, right? You can keep your campaign between the ditches. Another thing that, around relationships, and as you build those and as you're fundraising, is just keep track of those phone conversations. So I have a running spreadsheet from 2011 until now, and I keep it up to date. I keep notes on the side so that when I'm going to call somebody back, I can really look at their giving history to me. And then I can see that maybe I can ask for a little bit more. So maybe they gave me $100 in the first race that I ran, and then they gave me 125, and then I work up to 150. So I'm always trying to increase that single donor gift. And that's what nonprofits do too. You can also micro-target. So you can go through your lists and give the people that you think are going to give you, money for sure. Those are ones. The people that and they might give, those are twos. People that you don't know and might give, meaning maybe it's a Democrat or maybe it's a Republican, and they look like they have a pretty good donor history on somebody else's record. And you're thinking, well, they've never given to me. Maybe they might give to me because of party politics. So mark those down and go after your ones first. Low-hanging fruit, go after your ones first. Go into your phone contacts. There are apps that you can take your phone contacts and you can pull those out and put them into an Excel spread and do the same thing. Go through and mark 1, 2, 3, and maybe even category 4. And if you've kept good notes in your phone contacts, it's going to pay off. And if you've kept your contacts updated, it's going to pay off. Otherwise, you'll have a slow slog through that contact list. I just exported mine the other day to update it, and I've got 3,000 contacts in here. And these people in here may not be on my donor spreadsheet. So I cross compare all the time. So it sounds like a lot of work, because it is. It's a lot of work. And when you're running for state office, it's me, myself, and I, right? You get a clerk for 4 months and then ta-ta, there they go. And you're really on your own, unless you get a really good volunteer who knows data input and can help you kind of navigate through that. So those are some of the first things that I would say. I'm looking down here. Another thing, very wise person who's on this call, I was having trouble once I got into the state Senate trying to get some of my bills through and get people, I was a freshman. And he wisely said to me, he said, Liz, it's the 3 Ps, equal measure of politics, policy, and personality. And that really applies to fundraising too, because they're going to want to know your politics. They want to know what kind of policy you're writing. I mean, there are donors that really want to know that. Maybe it's a little bit nerdy, but you know who you can talk to about that. And then of course, personality. And personality plays a big part in that. People want to follow leaders. They want to know that their legislator is active. going to meetings, making sure that they're problem solving, digging in when there's a disaster. And if you've done some of those things as a community leader, those are transferable skills into politics and into running, a campaign.
I think that's a good segue to what I wanted to lead with, which is campaigning is lonely, especially at a local level. You will likely have people tell you, I'm behind you. I'll do this. I'll do that. I'll knock doors. I'll put out signs. And they may on the first weekend. After the primary, and you still have more doors to knock, and you have more signs that need to be replaced because a windstorm came through, guess what? They're not likely going to be there. And my advice on that is don't take it personal. You wanted to do this, right? You made the decision to get into it. Your parents didn't do it. Your spouse really, they probably support you if you have a spouse, but they didn't make that decision for you. So you have to be prepared to go that alone. And fundraising, I find to be the loneliest thing. It's my least favorite part of being in politics, which should say a lot. I'd rather answer angry emails about fireworks for 10 straight hours than fundraise. Mike brought up an interesting statement. If you don't believe in yourself, why would you expect anyone else to? That's probably the second thing you need to know as you walk into fundraising. If you don't have your elevator pitch done before you tell anyone outside of your family that you're running for office, you're going to struggle fundraising. You need to develop those things before you really go public. And your friends and family letter, I agree 100%. If you don't do a friends and I've done it and I have not done it, and it's super effective. If you don't do it, you're leaving cash on the table. And you can frame your friends and family letter to a direct ask. If you donate $100 to me, this is how many door knocker pamphlets I can print, or $250 will help me buy this many signs. So that kind of motivates, in my opinion, it motivates people to say, okay, you know what, I'll take care of 100 signs for you. Here's the money to do so. I've spent too much time going through campaign disclosure reports. I'm a data analyst in my personal life, so it's something that I combine my two nerdy worlds, and it's something that I was pretty passionate about. I went back the last 20 years, whether it was school board, county board, and a city election, whether it's mayor or city council, and just researched who donates. Do I have a common thread with those people? Are they promoters or are they detractors? If they're detractors, move on. Not everybody, and that's probably the hard part about campaigning, not everybody's going to love you as much as your parents. And if you can't get used to that campaigning, you're not probably going to do well if you make it to office. And I think the mayor, I know I really picked the mayor's brain, and Brent and Mike throughout the years on how to run and how to be an effective community leader. And the mayor can attest, my first 6 months in office were pretty hard because I think I took it way too personal. And so don't focus on the detractors, focus on the promoters. And I think the last thing I would say is, a lot of times it is about the cash, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes the people that are really influential on social media within your community, and I think it's a lot more effective at the local level than at the state level. But there are a lot of people out there that are very influential on social media or in Rotary, or get those people on your side. They may not be able to financially contribute to your campaign, but what they can provide you in campaign capital is maybe more effective than the money that they can provide.
Thanks, Chad. And that leads us kind of well into the next point. And we'll start with Brent this time, and then Senator Mathis, Chad, and then end with you, Mike. But can you talk a little bit about how you can maximize the efficacy to carry your dollar the furthest, in the concept of burn rate?
Well, obviously the concept of burn rate is how much you're spending on your campaign for staff and things of that nature that really aren't that don't necessarily help you win the election, if you will. But burn rate, particularly at a higher level offices, is to hire staff and the things that you're doing to maintain your campaign. And you want your burn rate to be as little as possible while still having the people around you that you need. So if you're anticipating a run for Congress, not that anybody on this call would be doing that, if you're anticipating a run for Congress, then you're looking at at that level, at the congressional level, you're looking at a campaign manager, you're looking at a media or communication firm, you're looking at the ads that you're going to have to run, things like that. You have to be careful not to burn through the money that you need for your TV advertising or your direct mail or what have you. And so you need to keep your burn rate as low as possible. At obviously the school board, city council level, you probably would have not very much burn rate, although at city council level, you might hire somebody to do some campaign work for you and things of that nature. You just have to make sure it's not eating up too much of what you're raising the money to do, which is to get your message out. What was the rest of the question, Drew? I forgot.
You're just fine. Just maximizing efficiency, like we talked about, as you and how you carry your dollar the furthest.
Yeah, and again, that's part of it. The other part of it is, and this is changing rapidly, is when you spend your money, particularly with early voting and things that have happened, even if it's only 20 days as opposed to 29 days, whatever it may be, with absentee voting and things of that nature. Your efficiency of your money is also making sure you spend it at the proper time. I mean, I know that at the end of this last legislative campaign, there were a couple of media markets because of the presidential race, senator race, and so on, that people had money and they couldn't even buy TV. It was all bought up. And so, direct mail is still very important, as is whatever media may be, social media, as Chad mentioned. But one thing that is new and different, and this would apply to a school board, or this would even apply to a city council, although not as much, is make sure you're spending your money efficiently and timely. The last thing you want to do is end up on election day with, I don't know, let's say at a city council level, $1,500 or $2,000 in the bank that you could have done something on social media or maybe gotten out of targeted mailing. So the rules of the game are changing. There is way too much money in politics these days for a variety of reasons, particularly at the state, federal level, from money coming in from outside the state or money coming in from all these other types of groups across the nation. And so there's too much money. And so you've got to spend it judiciously and timely.
I'll jump in on that, I guess. For city council, and some have hired consulting firms to help them. I think if you are a candidate with lesser name recognition, maybe that would be beneficial for you. If you have volunteered in the community, if you have worked hard to get your name out there, I don't know that it's a good use of money. And I think I've been rather consistent on that. Well, observing what happens at the state level, of course, you're gonna probably need to do that, and that you're gonna have to raise the money for that. Brent mentioned something that I, in the last campaign, really worked hard with. I have a group of people that I trust, and I bounce a lot of really stupid ideas off them, and I can trust that it's not likely gonna get out. One of the things after the primary that kind of became the mantra was no regrets. Do not leave anything on the table. You don't want to be sitting there on election night watching results come in and say, you know what, I should have done another mailer, or I should have knocked on this precinct more, as you see the results come in and it's not going in your favor. I didn't want to be in that situation. And so I had a little bit of strategy as to when my mailer would hit. And I took a lot of advisement from folks that had done it before and said, what was effective for you? I pretty much exhausted my account by the time the general election came along. And one thing that I didn't touch on in the last section that I did want to touch on, at the local level, if you have the means, you don't have to fundraise necessarily. You can spend your own money. There's nothing saying you can't spend your own money. You should probably talk to the folks in your household to make sure that they're okay with that. In the last election, I loaned my own campaign, I think $3,500. And I knew I wasn't going to get that back. I get paid $1,000 a month to be on the city council, averages out to about $4.50 an hour. I knew that, in a couple of months I could get that money back if I won. I think you have to be prepared to do that. Sometimes your fundraising message, especially in a big race. Locally, we don't have a lot. We have the mayor and 2 council seats. I ran in a 3 council seat race with 3 incumbents and 3 newcomers, 3 challengers. The money dried up quickly, especially for unproven candidates. And so be prepared for that. And hopefully you have the means to do so. When you get to the state level, I'm sure you folks spend your own money on stuff, but you're not going to be able to get it to go very far. So that's where the fundraising I think is super important.
Yeah, I'd say the practicality of this is that you have to ask yourself, what I'm doing or what I'm buying, is it going to get me a vote? Whether it's attending an event or whether it is participating in a panel, you have to take a look at it and say, is my time well spent reaching the goal? And the goal is to win. The goal is to win. So if I am distracted over here, it means that I'm not getting to my constituents over here. And then as an office holder, you also have responsibility, and you have, you have a commitment to your constituents that you're going to do your job. So the eye on the prize is always the vote. Is this going to get me a number that's going to win? And there are I think some candidates who, especially in the state Senate, you're elected for a 4-year term and you raise money your election year, and then the next year you kind of, I don't have to raise any money this year. I was not one of those people. I was still on the phone. I was still, making calls, asking for a lesser amount, an off-year amount, because I wanted to spend more. And Brett talked about this burn rate. I spent money in 19 on things that I knew I was going to need for 2020, so that I could spend 2020 still fundraising, but going door to door, which didn't happen during the pandemic. And I was uncontested in 2020. So, but the plan was, I'm going to update some of my yard signs, or I'm going to spend some money on things that I would normally spend in 2020, and I can get new money in 2020 to do that. So it's just a pattern of budgeting, knowing where you are, knowing how much money you need to pay the bills, how much you need to help others fundraise. That's another thing. If you help somebody else fundraise, does that help you get to the majority? Does that help you, perhaps there's another person who thinks the way you do about certain things. Are you able to get them into office that's going to help your cause or help the cause for your own constituents? But I think it's like in business, everybody has performance reviews. So for those on the listening today, again, the practicality of it is, if you have a performance review in business, your boss is asking you, okay, here are the things that I want you to do this year. I want you to increase sales. I want you to do da. Okay, what's going to get you there? These things. So all through the year, after that performance review, you have to keep thinking, all right, I've got another performance review coming up next year. Did I do these things to get there? And that is not dissimilar to running for office. You have to analyze, what are those things that are going to get me votes? How can I get into office, and how can I represent and lead this constituency in a way that I think is good? And so it's just, fundraising follows along those lines. For maximum efficiency, again, low-hanging fruit. Start with the low-hanging fruit, and that's where you get momentum. And put that money away, and then watch, what comes up. Again, Brent, talked about there are no spots open. If you wait too late to spend that money, it's not going to do you any good either. So just strategizing, put it on a spreadsheet, put it on Google Docs, how you're going to do this, what this looks like, kind of that blueprint of what it looks like, and then follow it. Yeah, there are going to be things that are upsetting. You got another person in a primary, you do this or that. There are going to be things that you have to be flexible with, but have a good plan that how you're going to spend your money and what you're going to spend it on.
Thanks, Senator. Mike, that brings us to you.
Sure. So I agree with with what everybody else has already said. But there's a couple caveats. I have seen candidates that spent $10,000 on a website that got essentially no benefit out of it. By the way, I'm 71 years old. I'm not that engaged in social media kind of stuff, and that is taking a bigger place in campaigns nowadays. I remember a certain special election in Eastern Iowa for a state Senate seat where it was a crucial race, and it was going to determine control of the legislature. Okay, and so we spent the Senate Majority Fund spent in the neighborhood of over $500,000 on social media, and I would confess we got no measurable results. You've got to be careful about the kinds of stuff you do and figuring out if it's actually going to benefit or not. And it may have benefited, but we got no measurable results. That's about 10 years ago. And so you got to spend your money smartly. Spending $10,000 on a website for a city council race or a school board race, when that's going to probably keep you from communicating by mail to likely voters in the municipal election or likely voters in the school board elections, that's probably not a wise expenditure of money. But there are going to be entities out there that are going to come to you and say, hey, we've got a great deal for you. We can give you a website, and we'll do it for $7,500 instead of for $10,000. So you're going to see that kind of stuff. So be careful about that. In terms of burn rate, you want to be careful about that, but you also don't want to save all your money for the last weekend when you're going to be appealing to those undecided voters. There's a whole bunch of voters out there in partisan races that have already made up their minds before they even know who the candidates are. So a lot in legislative campaigns, a lot of times we kind of focus on, let's find those undecided voters that are going to make up their mind late and try and appeal to them. And that's why you see a lot of stuff on TV. TV is a very inefficient marketplace, especially here in Council Bluffs, because you're delivering a message to over 1 million people for a state Senate district that only has 60,000 people in it, but you're paying to reach 1 million. That's 940,000 people that can't do anything with your message because they're not qualified to vote in your district. So you got to be careful about that. But when, and I don't know the dates for this and how they've changed, but when is the first day people are going to receive absentee ballots? If you're doing a direct mail campaign, you better have letters to those people the same day, the day before, or the day after they receive that absentee ballot in the mail. And easily a third of the vote is usually absentee ballots. And so if that date is, I'll just make up a date, if that date is October 8th, that they get their absentee ballot, and you don't communicate with them until October 23rd, those folks have already mailed in their ballot. You got no chance of persuading. So you got to spend that money then, even though a lot of what you want to do may be about the voters that are making up their mind late. So don't neglect those kinds of things. And again, one of the things to do is to talk to other people that have ran in these races before about what they do to meet those kinds of things that are timelines that are really important. So I always had a tendency to say, let's spend all the money in the last week, because that's when the people are making up their minds. But that isn't always the wisest thing to do. And again, you can find out what makes sense by talking with people that have been there before.
Thanks, Mike. And Senator Mathis, I actually wanted to ask you, because you brought it up and then Mike brought it up too. Can you talk a little bit about special election and the difference? And then the process behind that, and then maybe a little bit about how your personal experience and your personal background and stuff and how that came into play, and just talk a little bit about how that went.
Yeah. When I was a reporter, I was interviewing Tom Vilsack, and when I got back to Cedar Rapids, I got a phone call, and a couple of people who had been in and around that meeting asked me if I had ever considered running for office. I said, I'm a journalist. No, I'm not going to run for office. And they said, well, we'd like you to run against Jim Leach. I said, Jim Leach, he's the most beloved Republican in Johnson County ever. Who's going to defeat him? No way. And Dave Loebsack defeated him that go round. So, never say never. So a couple years later, after I got out of reporting and I started working for a child welfare agency, I got approached by House leadership to run against a young politician who they felt was going to, be really good. His name was Craig Paulson. And Craig and I were friends. And actually, Craig was on the board of the child welfare agency that I work for. So I said, no, I'm not doing that. So a couple years later, they asked me to run again against him. I said, no, I'm not going to do it. And so I got a phone call. It was 2011. Got a phone call in September from a Senate staffer that worked for Mike. And I had taught her at Wartburg College. I had a stint between two TV jobs, and I was teaching First Amendment law and beginning reporting and writing and things like that at Wartburg College. And she had been one of my students, and then subsequently ended up on the Senate staff years later. And she called me. She said, Liz, Swati Dandekar just got appointed to the IUB, and she's going to vacate her position, and she's your senator. I said, yeah, she is. And I said, so who are we going to find to run against her or run against, or in the special election? She said, you. And I said, no, I'll help you find somebody. And then the more I thought about it, and my husband said, for crying out loud, you've been talking about this for years. It's time to step up. And so I said, all right, well, this was, okay, the advantages I thought it was a 7-week campaign. We had to do things quickly, which I liked, because being in a newsroom, that's what you do. I mean, just, make decisions quickly, you try to put out a product. So again, skill sets matched. And I wasn't in reporting at the time. I think I said I was in a nonprofit. So I'd been out of reporting for several years. And so we ran. So this 7 weeks was chaotic. It was, I learned the inside, being a reporter, you're always looking from the outside in. So now I was on the inside looking out going, oh, this is what happens. Okay, this is a lot of work. This is a lot of stress and pressure. And it was, I had a lot of people who were helping me. We had on one weekend, we had almost 700 volunteers here, because, you got to admit, the 26 seat in a 50-person chamber for the majority, there's a lot on the line there. And if I had known then what I know today, I would have been much more frightened about running for that seat. But I don't know, fearless, I guess, just doing that and jumping in at the time. And Mike, I'm sure he was biting his nails from over in, Council Bluffs, but we were able to pull everything together as a team, and it worked out very well for us at the time. The next year I had to run again for my own 4-year term. So, and in a different district, because it had been recarved. The core of the district was the same. But I went from 700 volunteers to 7 volunteers that year, and I had 2 opponents. So one opponent started, she didn't live in the district, and she dropped out on July 4th to join the Federalist Republic of America. So that was good for her and good for me. And so then there was another candidate who joined in about August and ran against me, and I defeated him quite handily. But that's how that worked. A special election is a flurry, and you have to have a lot of help. You cannot do it by yourself, because it comes up quickly and it ends pretty quickly. 7 weeks went by just incredibly fast, and you have to absorb a lot of information. As a reporter, I knew quite a bit. I covered politics for national conventions and, for 27 years following people around. in politics, interviewing a couple of the people on this call. And so, I knew the basic facts, but reporters, and I know how reporters can be vicious. So I knew what they were going to be more vicious with me. They were going to be, asking me all kinds of questions, which they did. And, and it was challenging to me. I'm a competitive person, and actually I loved it. And so, that's why I've been in it. That's why I've stayed in it, and I'm going to continue.
Thanks, Senator Mathis. You made a few good points, and I wanted to touch on just two quick things. So one, a lot of times with local elections, we don't do special elections in local offices. It's more your appointments, to a vacated post. But you mentioned Craig Paulson, and I had the fortune of working with him at Iowa State before I left the Ames chamber. He's a good guy. And I specifically, one thing I just want to note about him is I remember when he pulled someone from one of the committees and put himself on it to raise the gas tax in 2015. And I thought, man, that guy's got grit when he did that. So I just wanted to commend him because I think that cost him quite a bit, but that showed some political courage. So I wanted to highlight that. The next piece that I want to touch on is just door knocking and interacting with voters. We've talked a lot about the fundraising side of things, but I wanted to kind of touch base, and Chad, we'll start with you kind of for the more local perspective, just to talk a little bit about, strategy when it comes to door knocking and how to best interact with voters.
Yeah, so the first thing I would recommend is pull the voter lists. Where do people live that are voting? In Council Bluffs, there's about 5 precincts that really turn out, and it would be wise to spend some time, whether on your own, whether with someone who lives in a neighborhood. If it's one of these, we have a few historic neighborhoods that really turn out almost to 100% of the 2, 3, 4 block sections. Everyone votes. If you have a friend or a relative that lives in that neighborhood, ask them, hey, will you go and knock on these doors with me, make introductions? I learned, don't make promises. Your job there is to not promise them of what you will change or what you will do. Get your message out. And if there's a point of contention, explain where you're at on it, but listen to their point of view, because maybe that will help you change your mind. It was a quick way to realize, for me, some of the issues that were out there that I didn't think that the community really cared about, that they definitely did. And so you have to go home and you have to research and make a decision. Am I as well read on this topic as I should be? What I would not recommend doing is focusing a significant amount of effort, especially with 7 volunteers. If I had 7 volunteers, I think I could have done a lot. So I'm jealous of that part, but you really need to be making sure, just as we said earlier, to invest your money wisely, invest your time wisely. Focus in the high turnout areas. And if you're not going to door knock, there are very few examples, especially in Council Bluffs, of where people have been successful in winning an election or being elected that didn't knock on doors. You have to do it. And I don't know any other way to say that. I've looked at some of the most successful people that have run for office in Council Bluffs. Mike Gronsall is really the first part. He would knock on as many doors as possible. If you're not willing to do that, you should not run for office. I don't know any less direct way to say that. Don't run for office. Because if you're not comfortable knocking on someone's door, you're not going to be comfortable making a decision that will affect 65,000 people. So I don't want to be overly dramatic about it, but you have to knock on doors.
Thanks, Chad. And then Brent, will go to you, and then Mike, and then Senator Mathis.
I'll try to be relatively brief because the guru of door knocking is Senator Gronstal. He really is good at it, but I'll emphasize just a couple things Chad said. It is without a doubt the most important thing that you can do. Face-to-face contact is extremely important. And Mike and Liz and Chad can tell you, I'm sure that, not Chad so much, but people still remember that. I can remember 10 years after I was out of office, some lady stopped me in Hy-Vee and said, aren't you, whatever. Yeah, I remember when you knocked on my door. It was very, very telling. And as an aside, Mike and I, back when he had a cheesy mustache, we used to get mistaken, and we get mistaken a lot. Hy-Vee, they'd walk by and they'd say to Mike, "Hi, Brent," and they'd say to me, you know, "Hi, Mike," and I always said, "Go to hell," and kept walking. But I don't know if that helped or not. But they do remember you knock on the doors. So the toughest part about door knocking is getting to the first door. Once you get to the door, it's okay. At least for me, getting out and, you know, getting ready and going, it's like, crap. But once you hit the first door, then it's okay. By and large, almost everybody is polite. Some of them don't want to talk to you, but they'll take your thing and they'll smile. I mean, some of them will engage you, and you have to be careful when they engage you not to spend too much time. But you give them your little 15-second spiel, give them some a brochure, some information. They remember you were there. And as Mike had said, and I think Liz said too, when they're absentee balloting, they may keep that brochure by their phone or whatever, and they may look at it again when they vote. So the face-to-face contact is absolutely important. And Chad's right. I'm sure Mike has said it to people he recruited. If you're not going to door knock, then you're probably not going to win. You need to have that face-to-face. And at least on my side, when I was the leader, that was one of the ways we decided who got money. I mean, if we had money that we were going to help out with other candidates with, if you're not door knocking, then you're way down on my list. If you're door knocking, then I know you've got a shot and I'm going to give you money. So get out there and do it. It's hard until you get out there, and then it's actually pretty enjoyable. You have to do it. And as Chad said, you with Mike, he'll tell you he door knocked every precinct. Other people that aren't as dedicated or ambitious or anal as Mike was, I guess, you want to take your precincts and kind of go through them, and you want to time them out that I may hit this precinct, later and rather than earlier because I may have more votes or what have you. And then lastly, there's a lot of technology now. At least I don't know what the Democrats use. It may be the same thing, but I know the Republicans have a program called Advantage Mobile. It's on your phone, and you can get all your voter lists right on your phone. And so you can carry your phone around with you, and you'll have as updated a list as you can. So you know whose door you're knocking on, what their tendencies are. Do they only vote presidential elections? Do they vote every election? And you can kind of tailor that. They were telling me, just go to independents, Republicans. When I'm out, I'm going to knock on every door. I don't care if they're of the opposite party, because to me, if I can talk to them a little bit, I may leave them with the feeling like, well, he's not of my party, but he seems to be a reasonable person, so that they don't go after you as much. So you can tailor it exactly how much who you want to knock and when and where. But the more you knock, the better off you'll have of winning. It's just that simple.
Thanks, Brent. And then Mike, we'll go to you, and then
Sure.
Senator Mathis.
So door knocking, there's part of this that's really easy. So if you knock on 100 doors every night in 100 nights, you've hit 10,000 doors. That's a pretty good benchmark for candidates to hit 10,000 doors. That is one hell of a lot of time. It is and by the way, I tried to knock, 4:30 till dark. If they have to turn the lights on when you come onto their front porch, it's too late to be door knocking on their door. Okay, so the little old ladies kind of go, I'm scared. Why are you knocking on my door? So, but 100 doors a night, 100 nights, you've got that's a critical mass of doors to be door knocking on. But it's not just that you knock on their door, give them a piece of campaign literature. It's that you engage them in a brief conversation. And I call it reflective listening. You ask them what they think is important, and then you repeat it back to them in different words. Okay? Reflective listening, repeat it back to them so they know you've heard them. And you won't always get it right, but most of the time you will. The person that Brent Segrist beat when he first ran, he and I actually both, within a week of each other, knocked on the same door of a house. And when I knocked on the door, and neither one of us knew that. When I knocked on the door, the guy came to the door, and he was kind of a cranky guy, and he kind of said, he's middle 30s. He kind of said, what the problem is? It's all these welfare cheats. And I said, something? You're really right. anybody that takes a buck that doesn't need it is taking it away from somebody that does. Yeah, I got what he said. The guy Brent beat knocked on the same door. Guy came to the door, said the same thing. The problem is it's all these welfare cheats, to which he said, well, there really aren't that many welfare cheats. The percentage is about 5.8%. And so there's not that. He rejected what he said was an issue. And by the way, I was always a strong believer in welfare. You know, I always thought that was the right thing for a society to do and all that. And so when I answered the guy, I said, anybody that takes a buck that doesn't need it is taken away. So I affirmed my belief that welfare is the right thing to do. I didn't say, yeah, throw everybody off welfare. I said it in a way that affirmed his concern, but also didn't betray my values. Okay. And I think I got that guy's vote. I think Brent got that guy's vote too, because the guy running against Brent that basically said, I didn't hear you. So I think it's really easy. I call it, you got to go to the door, not just with the impression, but with the belief that everybody has a piece of the truth. And sometimes you get folks and you hear some kind of like, bad language about immigrants or whatever, and you sense that there's some racism behind that. Sometimes it's kind of hard to find their piece of the truth, but they do. If you talk to them for a minute, they do have concerns about the economic impact of companies that do things to deliberately hire immigrants and then kind of push wages down and all of that. And that part, you don't have to affirm the racism, but you can affirm the economic concern that maybe masks their racism. So that's, I think door knocking's great fun. There's always an excuse not to door knock, but once you get out there, it's always good, and you don't often knock off early once you're out on the streets and door knocking. So do it. And the other one advantage is you get to test market messages. You get to basically try some message when somebody comes up with a question to you, and some with some people it doesn't work very well. I can give you an example of that too, if I'm not using up too much time here. But the example is somebody asked the whole issue about transgender, and there's certainly some people that are worried about what that means if a boy is in a girl's bathroom, and there's all that kind of concern. And I tried a message, by the way, that did not work at all well, but the only vote I lost was that one door. And my message was, I was kind of test marketing my message. My message was, well, usually when somebody needs to use a bathroom, it's my inclination to get out of their way. I thought that might be a message that would sell. It was not a message that would sell. And I was able to test market that message at one door, not in front of a TV camera or anything. That was, so it's a great place to test your messages and to get good on your feet.
Thanks, Mike, and I appreciate the examples, both good and bad. So, Senator Mathis, will go to you to close out.
Yeah, I think I tell volunteers or anybody who helps knock on doors, you have invited yourself to their house. So you are a guest on their doorstep. So when they open that door, which they still do in Iowa, and it's just incredible how many people will come to the door. Occasionally you'll see people, peek out the blind, or you can hear dogs barking and then them trying to, quiet their dogs and stuff. So that's kind of entertaining, right? But generally people come to the door. And luckily enough, though, they recognize me as their senator, and it can start that conversation off right away. Now, there have been doors that I've knocked for people in other communities, and they don't know me from Adam, right? So I'll knock, and I recognize that I have invited myself to that doorstep. So I'm not going to engage in an argument with them. What I'm going to do is just start lightly. And again, like Brent said, we all have these new apps that help identify who's behind that door, how many people are Republicans, Democrats, or independents behind that door. So, whoever comes to the door, you kind of know what party they are. You're kind of guessing, but you engage in a conversation that's just basically an introduction. You're just introducing yourself. And then you use the cowboy card, they call it a cowboy card, or any, pamphlet or something like that as really a conversation piece. So you want to show them, that you're running for office and et cetera. And they usually take the conversation where they want it to go. I've very rarely been in a situation where somebody didn't want to tell me something. And that's the second rule. All politics is local, right? Try to guide, if you can, the conversation back to the state Senate, because I'm district number 34. So every even numbered Senate seat runs during a presidential election. So people wanted to talk about the presidential election. And of course, I'm at their doorstep. I'm going to allow for that. But then I'm listening intently to see how I can guide that into an issue about the state Senate. Because it's sometimes surprising how much they know, but again, surprising how much they don't know about what you do for them as a state senator or how state government works. Sometimes they think, oh, are you on break from Washington? No, not yet. No, I'm not. I work for you in the state Senate. I'm at the state capitol. Our session is from April to, or January to April. We work on policy after that, and I kind of describe what it is that we do. And sometimes they're like, oh, this is great. Well, I'm so glad to meet you. And, and then we'll talk about family. We'll talk about where the kids go to school. And I'd say maybe 50% of the time you talk about issues. And of that 50%, probably maybe less than 20 or 25%, you're talking about really heated issues. So again, you knock on the door, you don't always know what you're going to face. You can take some of those predictors and use those, for the conversation, but you don't really ever know where it might be headed. Humility, you're out there knocking on the door, again, it is the thing that really separates those who want to run for office and hold office from those who are not into it. A friend of mine ran for office and she said, I'll never do that again. I hated door knocking. I hated going door to door. Actually, I like it because again, like Mike says, you get all kinds of comments. You hear what people are thinking. And, when people say, the Iowa poll comes out and I'm thinking, well, I already knew that. I went to 1,000 doors and I already heard that, So you can use it to your benefit. You can use it to your benefit writing policy, and it gives you energy. It gives you energy. After I come back from a night of door knocking, oh, wow, I'm just like, excited. I'm eating dinner at, 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night, but, it just gives you a lot of energy. The other thing, you can sell it as a weight loss plan to your volunteers. One day I walked 25 miles. It was from almost, you can't get there too soon on a Saturday because everybody's in their jammies, so you got to wait until about 10 o'clock, 10:30, and then you can go until, until the nightlight comes on, outside, but you got to be careful. You don't want to scare anybody. And that's another thing, knocking on somebody's door, you don't always know whether they're going to protect themselves. It's gotten a little bit scarier knocking on doors, in the past couple of years, people just worrying about their safety. And so that's kind of reflective too, but it's reflective in the polls as well, that people are more concerned about public safety than ever before. So, those are my points about knocking on doors. If you had to choose whether you're going to knock on doors or not, do it. I was at a table one time and it was mixed, Republican, Democrat, Independent, and we were talking about our views of door knocking. And a couple of people that had one office said, "Oh, I never door knock." Oh, I said, "Well, and do you fundraise?" "Oh, I never fundraise." And that tells me that maybe the party is supporting them with a huge amount of money. Do they really know what their voters are saying and what they want them to do. And I think the best way for me to do that, I'm not judging anybody else how they're going to do it, but for me, I couldn't run that kind of campaign. I want to know what people think of the doors. I want to raise money from the donors in my district. And I just think that you're a better candidate and represent your area much better that way.
Thanks, Senator. I appreciate you and Mike and Brent and Chad, all of your insight. I wish we could continue to have this conversation. I knew this was going to be a good panel. Oh, go ahead, Brent. Did you have something?
Yeah, just one quick thing, because Mike brought up the first time I ran, it was like 13,000 votes cast, and I won by 24 votes. I mean, without a doubt, and I don't remember how many doors I knocked. It was quite a few, not as many as Mike, but without a doubt, had I not been knocking on doors, I wouldn't have won. I wasn't supposed to win anyway, but I did, and it was directly tied to the door knocking. Were there 25 people that sat at home, didn't vote that time, that maybe would have voted against me and I lost a race? There probably was, but my opponent maybe didn't get to those doors. So door knocking is absolutely key, and that's the example I use to prove it. When you win by 24 votes, door knocks account. And I just want Senator Gronsfeld to know that during one of his talks, I did call his barber and made an appointment for a haircut for him this afternoon. He's looking a little shaggy there.
I appreciate you guys that are follically impaired suggesting what I do with my hair.
Hey, Mike.
This is the year of our 50th anniversary, and my hair was longer when I got married to Connie 50 years ago.
That I believe.
Mike, come on over. I'll give you a haircut for free, but it'll be this style.
I think, Brent, in all seriousness for a second, I'm not going to insult anyone's hair. As you can tell, mine's falling out. So I'm hanging on to what I can. And to Brent's point, in a local election, 20 votes may decide it. And I did not knock on doors my first election. I did not send out a mailer, and I lost. I think it was, don't quote me, I think it was like 280 votes. I lost by 280 votes to a guy who didn't have name recognition in our community, which goes a long ways. Didn't have the name recognition that my family had. But you know what he did? He knocked on a lot of doors, and that's why he beat me. And it took me some time to get over that. And I had gentle nudges from some people that were on this call that you just got to pick it up and get over it. When I had a chance to redo it, I didn't make those same mistakes. And I don't know what the gap between, we elected 3 between where I finished in first and fourth place, but it was sizable. I think it was maybe more than 1,000 votes. It made the difference. And so I've learned a lot from listening to the 3 people that are way more seasoned at this than I have. And if I decide to run for an office again, I will definitely employ those techniques. And I hope that, more importantly, you're not, at least speaking for myself, it's not pestering or being annoying if you ask someone who holds an office or has ran for office before for some advice. There are a lot of times, especially this last cycle, where Brent and I would catch up on the phone or something, and he'd say, what are you hearing? What do you think is going to happen here? And that's not because my opinion is not all that valuable, but I'm talking to people that Brent and his opponent were knocking on their doors, and I was hearing what was resonating. But I was also looking at their disclosure reports and where's the money coming from? And that's where it gets complicated in the state races. There's so much outside money. And I had made the prediction, hey, Brent, I think you're going to win based on one factor. And there was a lot of outside money from California and Washington, D.C., but there wasn't a lot of in precinct or in district money. And I said, I don't know if it makes a difference, but you're out raising your opponent in district by about 20%. And I think that's probably going to make a difference. Having those conversations and saying, what do you think I'm doing right? What am I not doing well? It goes a long way. And don't be afraid to adjust midstream. I'm done now.
Thanks, Chad. And thanks again to everyone else too. And just to the points you guys all talked about, Brent, I mean, it goes all the way up to, we just had a great example of it last year. Rita Hart lost by 6 votes. And I mean, it's absolutely incredible. So it just shows how important the voter outreach is. But again, like I said, I would love to continue this conversation with all of you. You all have so much knowledge, and I just really, really appreciate you guys and Senator Mathis as well. But joining us to have a conversation about this. And thank you so much, and have a nice rest of the day and a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Nice catching up with you guys.
Thanks. Bye-bye.